He stood amidst the thumping bass with his arm draped around a stranger and laughed into the phone while telling me to divorce him if I did not like it. I did not scream or beg. I simply whispered a single sentence and began dismantling the world he believed was untouchable. That night he thought he was a king, but by the time he received my reply, his entire empire had been reduced to nothing but legal summons. My name is Natalie Hayes. I am 33 years old, and on paper I am the definition of harmless. I work as a data analyst for the Bright Line Solace Network, a small nonprofit organization here in Riverton, Ohio, where I organize spreadsheets to help secure funding for community gardens and after-school literacy programs. I wear beige cardigans. I drive a mid-sized sedan with a high safety rating. To the neighbors and especially to my husband, I am the supportive, quiet wife who keeps the domestic machinery humming while he conquers the world. They have no idea who I used to be. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be about me. After 3 years of keeping my head down at Bright Line, I had finally been promoted to project manager. It came with a 15% raise in a corner office that actually had a window. It was a small victory, quiet and steady, much like the life I had curated for myself. Evan had promised to be home by 7:00. My husband, Evan Cooper, is 36 years old and the founder of Novarise Entertainment. He is a man who deals in illusion. He sells atmosphere, organizing high-end launch parties for liquor brands and exclusive nights for nightclub chains. He is handsome in that polished, curated way that requires expensive haircuts and tailored suits. He thrives on being the king of nightlife, the man who knows every bouncer and every bartender in the city. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 11:30 at night. The celebratory dinner I had cooked, a saffron ratto that required 40 minutes of constant stirring, had gone cold and stiff in the pan hours ago. The bottle of vintage Cabernet I had bought, costing $1.80, which was a splurge for us, sat unopened on the granite counter. I was not worried that he was hurt. I was not worried that he was in a ditch somewhere. I knew exactly where he was because I could see him. I sat on the sofa Evan had picked out, scrolling through Instagram on my phone. The screen was a window into the life he preferred over ours. The stories from his friends and various hangers-on were flooding my feed. They were all tagged at the Nebula Room, the newest, most exclusive club in downtown Riverton. There was Evan. In a video posted 15 minutes ago by a local DJ, my husband was standing in the VIP section. The lighting was a wash of deep bruised purple and neon pink. He was holding a bottle of Grey Goose like a trophy. He was laughing, his head thrown back, his teeth white and gleaming in the strobe lights. And then I saw the hand. A woman was draped over his shoulder. She had long dark hair and was wearing a dress that looked more like silver paint than fabric. Her arm was hooked around his neck, her fingers toying with the collar of his shirt. Evan did not pull away. He leaned into her. The humiliation started in my stomach, a cold, heavy stone dropping into deep water. He had told me he was going for networking. He had said it was a critical meeting with a brand representative. I dialed his number. I expected it to go to voicemail. I expected the cowardice of a missed call, but he answered on the third ring. The sound that exploded from my phone was deafening. It was a wall of distorted bass, the kind that vibrates your rib cage even through a tiny speaker. I could hear screaming manic laughter and the clinking of glass. "Evan," I said. My voice sounded small in the quiet kitchen. "I am working, baby." He shouted over the noise. He sounded slurred, the vowels stretching out too long. "I told you this would go late. You are always so dramatic." I felt my grip tighten on the phone until my knuckles turned white. "It is almost midnight, Evan. Today was my promotion. You promised you would be home at 7:00. We were supposed to celebrate. Networking does not run on a schedule, Natalie." He laughed, a harsh barking sound. Then the background noise changed. The bass did not get quieter, but the ambient chatter got clearer. I realized with a sick jolt that he had put me on speakerphone. He was performing. He was broadcasting our marriage to his table of sycophants to show them how little he cared. "I am at the Nebula Room," he announced, his voice booming for his audience. "This is where the money is made." "You are drunk," I said, my voice steady. though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "And you are embarrassing yourself. Please just come home." There was a pause. I heard the woman's voice, the one with the dark hair, close to the microphone. She giggled, a sharp, cruel sound. "Is that the wife? Tell her to relax." Evan laughed with her, and then, fueled by the alcohol, the adrenaline of the club, and the desperate need to look powerful in front of his entourage, he delivered the line that would end his life as he knew it. "Look, I am busy," he sneered into the phone. "I am at the club. Don't like it. Divorce me." The reaction was immediate. I heard the roar of laughter from his booth. I heard the woman's voice shriek with delight. "Yeah, divorce her," she yelled. It was a sonic boom of disrespect. It was the kind of public flanging that was designed to make me feel small, to remind me that I was the boring accessory at home while he was the star. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not beg him to stop. A strange icy calm washed over me. It was a sensation I had not felt in 5 years. It was the feeling of a switch flipping in a dark room, illuminating everything in stark clinical detail. The hurt vanished, replaced instantly by clarity. "Remember you said that," I whispered. I ended the call. The silence of the house rushed back in, heavy and suffocating. I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I began to walk through the house. I walked through the living room looking at the 65-inch television Evan had insisted on buying for football Sundays he never spent at home. I looked at the leather recliner that no one was allowed to sit in but him. I walked into the dining room and looked at the pile of bills on the table. The mortgage, the car payments, the credit cards. They were all in both our names. I realized then that I was not living in a home. I was living on a stage set. I was a prop in the Evan Cooper show designed to make him look like a stable family man so he could secure better loans for his business. I checked my phone again. It was now midnight. We had installed a location sharing app 2 years ago. At the time, Evan had framed it as a safety measure, saying he wanted to make sure I was safe when I drove home late from the office. Now I opened the map. His dot was still downtown, but it was no longer at the Nebular Room. I watched the blue dot move 2 blocks east and stop. I zoomed in. It was a boutique hotel called the Vermilion, a place known for its discretion and high hourly rates. He was not coming home. I stared at the screen until the backlight dimmed and turned off. The betrayal was absolute. He had not just missed dinner. He had not just humiliated me. He was actively destroying the vows we had made, and he was doing it with the arrogance of a man who believed I had nowhere else to go. He thought I was trapped by my modest salary and my quiet nature. He had forgotten who I was before I became Mrs. Cooper. I walked into our bedroom. I went to the walk-in closet, pushing aside his rows of designer suits and silk ties. In the very back, behind a stack of winter blankets, was a small fireproof lockbox. I pulled it out and set it on the floor. My fingers dialed the combination. It was a code I never wrote down. A sequence of numbers from a case I had cracked 10 years ago. The lid popped open. Inside, there was no jewelry. There were no love letters. Instead, there was an old ID badge on a lanyard. The photo showed a younger version of me. My eyes sharper, my expression less accommodating. Below the photo was my title, Senior Forensic Data Analyst, Fraud Investigation Unit. Next to the badge lay 3 encrypted USB drives and a black notebook filled with technical shorthand coding scripts and surveillance techniques. I had left that world because it was dark. I had left it because seeing the worst in people every single day had started to erode my soul. Evan had been my escape. He had been the light, the fun, the promise of a normal, happy life. But the light was artificial, and the happiness was a lie. I reached into the box and took out a fresh notepad and a red marker. My hand did not shake. My breathing was slow and even. I wrote 5 words on the paper. Don't like it. Divorce me. I took the red marker and drew a single thick line underneath the sentence. It was not just a reminder. It was a directive. I placed the note on top of the USB drives and closed the lid. The click of the lock engaging sounded like the cocking of a gun. Evan Cooper had wanted a divorce. He had challenged me to leave him. He thought that meant I would pack a bag and go cry at my mother's house. He was about to learn that when you invite a forensic investigator to audit your life, You had better be clean. And Evan Cooper was filthy. I stood up, dusting off my knees. The crying wife was gone. The investigator was back on the clock. The front door opened at 10:00 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I did not look up. I listened to the heavy, uneven footsteps of my husband as he navigated the hallway. He stopped in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a practiced casualness that might have fooled anyone else, but I was not anyone else. I was the woman who had spent the last 5 years studying him. Evan looked like a wreck, but a curated one. His shirt was untucked on one side. His hair was messy in a way that suggested a wild night rather than neglect, and the smell rolling off him was a nauseating cocktail of stale gin, cigarette smoke, and a cloying floral perfume that certainly did not belong to me. "Crazy night," he said, his voice raspy. He rubbed his face with both hands. "The client would not let us leave. You know how it is. We had to close the deal." He walked over, intending to kiss the top of my head. I shifted my weight on the stool, just an inch, but it was enough to make his lips land on empty air. He paused, frowning slightly, but decided to ignore the rejection. It was easier for him to pretend everything was normal. "I need a shower," he muttered, pulling his phone out of his pocket. I watched his hand. It was a movement so fast that an untrained eye would have missed it. As he set the phone down on the counter to grab a glass of water, his thumb hovered over the side button. He angled the screen face down. When he picked it back up a second later, he did not just hold it. He gripped it with his palm, covering the glass. These were micro gestures. They were subconscious physical tells of deception, avoidance of eye contact, protective body language over personal devices, the slight increase in blinking rate when he said the words client and deal. "Go ahead," I said. My voice was flat. "You smell like a distillery." He laughed, a hollow sound, and headed upstairs. As the water in the master bathroom pipes began to groan, I remained still. My mind, however, was traveling back in time, stripping away the layers of domestic softness I had accumulated to reveal the steel frame underneath. 10 years ago, I was not Natalie Cooper, the project manager for a nonprofit. I was Natalie Hayes, a forensic data analyst for a boutique firm in Chicago that specialized in corporate fraud. My job was not to be nice. My job was to take thousands of rows of financial data, look for the anomalies that did not fit the pattern, and construct a cage of evidence around white-collar criminals. I remembered the nights I spent in a windowless server room, my face illuminated by the blue light of 3 monitors. I remembered the thrill of finding a shell company hidden in a ledger, the adrenaline of tracing a routed wire transfer back to a CEO's private offshore account. I saw the world as a matrix of transactions. People lied, but numbers never did. If you looked close enough, the math always confessed. That was when I met Evan. He was different then, or at least he seemed to be. He was 26, managing small events for local art galleries. He was charismatic, bursting with energy, and he looked at me with a reverence that felt intoxicating. He told me he loved my brain. He told me he was tired of the girls in his industry who only cared about VIP tables and bottle service. "You are so sharp," he had whispered to me one night after I dismantled a waiter's attempt to overcharge us by 20%. "We could build something incredible together. You with the brains, me with the vision." I believed him. I was tired of the cynicism of my job. I was tired of seeing the worst in human nature. So when Evan proposed starting Novarise Entertainment, he sold me a dream. He told me I was too stressed, that the investigation work was eating me alive. "Let me carry the load," he had said, holding my hands. "You handle the house. You get a nice, easy job where you can help people. Let me deal with the sharks." I had surrendered. I had handed over my armor because I thought I was entering a sanctuary. I thought we were partners. Now, sitting in my kitchen with the smell of his betrayal still lingering in the air, I realized I had not entered a sanctuary. I had entered a blind spot. I stood up and walked to the shared iPad we kept in the living room. It was linked to our family email account, the one we used for utility bills and mortgage statements. Evan often forgot that this email was also the recovery address for his primary banking notifications. He was in the shower. I had perhaps 15 minutes. I did not need his password. I knew his package. He used variations of his first car model and his high school football jersey number. It took me 2 attempts to log into the credit card portal. I navigated to the transaction history. I did not look at the totals. I looked for the frequency. Nebula Room $350. Thursday, October 12th. Nebula Room $400. Thursday, October 19th. Nebula Room $600. Thursday, October 26th. This was not a one-time networking event. This was a subscription. I scrolled back further. The charges were consistent. Every Thursday night for the past 6 months, Evan had been at that club, and interspersed with the club charges were others that made my stomach turn. Sephora, $200. Blue Velvet Laundry, $180. The Vermilion Hotel, $150. He was not just cheating on me. He was financing his affair with our joint assets. He was buying perfume and hotel rooms with the money we were supposedly saving for a down payment on a vacation home. I needed a name. The numbers told me the what and the when, but I needed the who. I picked up my own phone and dialed Zoe Marshall. Zoe was my lifeline to reality. We had been roommates in college. Now she was in her final year of law school and paid her tuition by bartending at the Gilded Cage, a high-end lounge 3 streets away from the Nebula Room. Zoe had never liked Evan. She called him a brand, not a man. "Hello," Zoe answered on the second ring. She sounded groggy. She likely had worked the closing shift last night. "Zoe," I said, "I need you to be honest with me, not protecting my feelings." There was a pause, and then the rustling of sheets. Zoe was sitting up. "Okay, what happened?" "Evan came home at 10:00 in the morning. He says he was networking at the Nebula Room. He told me on the phone last night that if I did not like it, I should divorce him." That son of a Zoe hissed. "Who is she?" "Zoe," I asked. "I know there is someone. I can see the charges." "Please tell me." Zoe sighed, a heavy resigned sound. "I did not want to be the one to break your heart, Nat. I thought maybe it was just flirting. But yes, I have seen them. Sabrina Tarrers." Zoe said, "You know her. She is that influencer who is famous for being famous. Dark hair, always wears silver. Evan brings her into my bar sometimes before they head to Nebula. He introduces her as his special business partner, but Nat business partners do not sit on the same side of the booth, and they certainly do not leave together to go to the Vermilion." Sabrina Tarrers, I knew the face. I had seen her on the Novari Instagram page, usually holding a branded glass, tagging Evan in the captions with heart emojis that I had stupidly interpreted as professional enthusiasm. "How long?" I asked. "I first saw them together in May," Zoe said softly. "So, 6 months, maybe longer. 6 months." The humiliation I had felt last night began to crystallize into something colder. This was not a mistake. This was a campaign. Evan had been systematically replacing me while living in the house I cleaned, eating the food I cooked, and spending the money I earned. "Thank you, Zoe," I said. "Nat, what are you going to do?" Zoe asked, her voice laced with worry. "Do you want me to come over? Do you want to crash at my place?" "No," I said. "I have work to do." I hung up upstairs. The shower water stopped running. I heard the heavy thud of Evan's feet moving toward the bedroom. He would dress, put on his working-from-home face, and come downstairs expecting coffee and a compliant wife. He was going to find a wife, but Natalie Cooper was currently unavailable. I walked into the small guest room that served as my home office. It was decorated in soft pastels, a stark contrast to the sterile labs I used to work in. I opened the closet door and reached up to the top shelf. Behind a stack of old tax returns, I pulled down a heavy gray laptop case. Inside was a Lenovo ThinkPad, thick and unlowly, lacking the sleek design of the MacBooks Evan insisted we buy. This was my machine. It had not been turned on in 4 years. I plugged it in. The fan roared to life with a dusty cough. I inserted the USB drive I had retrieved from the lockbox last night. The screen flickered, bypassing the standard Windows login and booting directly into a custom Linux distribution I had built myself a decade ago. The background was black. The text was green. There were no icons for social media, no shortcuts to Pinterest. There were only tools for extraction, decryption, and analysis. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It felt different than the ergonomic keyboard I used at Brightline. The keys had more resistance. They felt like triggers. The air in the room seemed to drop 10. My posture changed. I stopped slouching. My spine straightened. The soft, empathetic expression I wore for my nonprofit donors vanished, replaced by a neutral, predatory mask. Evan had told me I was too intense. He had told me to stop analyzing everything. He had begged me to put this part of myself to sleep so he could feel like the big man in the house. I had listened. I had buried Natalie Hayes deep in the ground, but Evan had made a critical error. He had disturbed the grave. I opened a new directory on the encrypted drive. I typed in the command to create a new folder, Project Divorce. I paused. The cursor blinked at me, a rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. That title was too simple. It implied a legal separation, a division of assets, a sad negotiation over who keeps the toaster. This was not going to be a negotiation. This was going to be an autopsy of his wife. I hit the arrow key and added a subtitle to the project folder, Liberation and Judgment. I pressed enter. From the hallway, I heard Evan whistling. He was happy. He thought he had survived the night. He thought his little outburst on the phone had silenced me. I looked at the black screen, seeing my reflection in the glass. I did not look tired anymore. I looked dangerous. Welcome back, I whispered to myself. I began to type. The screen of my Lenovo ThinkPad cast a harsh green-tinted glow across my face as I accessed the financial nervous system of our marriage. Evan had always assumed that because I worked for a nonprofit, I had lost my taste for the aggressive, forensic accounting that defined my 20s. He assumed that because I let him handle the monthly utility bills, I did not know how to navigate the back end of a corporate ledger. He was wrong. I logged into the primary business account for Novarise Entertainment. Technically, I was still listed as a co-founder and a guarantor. In the early days, when no bank would touch Evan's vision without a second income on the application, my credit score had been the foundation upon which he built his kingdom. He had never removed me. Perhaps he forgot. Perhaps he thought I was too docile to ever look. I bypassed the summary page and went straight to the raw transaction data. I exported the last 12 months of activity into a CSV file and ran a simple pivot table script I had written years ago to identify recurring outflows to unverified vendors. The data poured down the screen like rain. To anyone else, it was just numbers. To me, it was a narrative. I saw the usual expenses, venue rentals, catering deposits, audio equipment leases. But then a pattern emerged. It was a rhythmic pulsing signal in the noise. Blue Nova Consulting LLC. The payments were consistent. $3,000 on the first of the month, $2,500 on the 15th. They were labeled vaguely in the memo lines as marketing retainer or strategic advisory. I frowned. Evan had never mentioned a firm called Blue Nova. We discussed his vendors over dinner constantly. I knew his lighting guy, his security contractor, and his liquor distributor by name. Blue Nova was a ghost. I opened a new terminal window and accessed the Secretary of State's Business Registry database. It was public information, but you had to know how to query it efficiently to find the connections hidden behind registered agents. I typed in Blue Nova Consulting LLC. The results loaded instantly. The company was formed 8 months ago. The business address was not an office, but a mail drop in a strip mall 3M from the Nebula Room. I scrolled down to the line labeled Managing Member. I stopped breathing for a second. Sabrina Torres. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the room. The narrative shifted instantly. Sabrina was not just the girl draped over his shoulder in an Instagram story. She was not just a chaotic element of his nightlife addiction. She was a structured liability. She was a financial partner. Evan was funneling $5,500 a month of company revenue that legally belonged to our household into a shell company owned by his mistress. It was a kickback scheme. He was likely booking her as a consultant to lower his taxable income while she took the cash tax-free or funneled it back to him in other ways. This was not just adultery. This was embezzlement and tax fraud. But the rabbit hole went deeper. I returned to the bank portal. My eyes caught a significant credit entry from 3 weeks ago. It was a deposit of $50,000 into the Novarise operating account. The source was listed as Riverton Regional Bank, Hellock Disbursement, a home equity line of credit. My blood ran cold. To open a line of credit against our home, the bank required the signatures of both owners. I had not signed anything. I had not stepped foot in a bank with Evan in over a year. I grabbed my car keys. The branch of Riverton Regional Bank was quiet, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. I walked to the desk of the branch manager, a woman named Linda, who had helped us refinance our mortgage 2 years ago. "Natalie," she said, smiling warmly, "I did not know you were coming in. Is Evan with you?" "Not today, Linda," I said. My voice was calm, pleasant, the voice of the project manager from Bright Line. "I was just reviewing our accounts online, and I noticed the new credit line disbursement. I feel so silly, but I seem to have misplaced my copy of the final paperwork. Could you print out the signature page for me? I just want to file it correctly for our taxes." "Of course," Linda said. She typed on her keyboard, oblivious to the fact that she was about to hand me a weapon. "It was great that we could get that approved so quickly for you guys," Evan said. The expansion couldn't wait. She handed me a warm, crisp sheet of paper. I looked down there at the bottom of the page. Above the line labeled co-bearer was my name, Natalie Hayes Cooper. The script was looped and slanted to the right. It looked like my signature. It had the same flourish on the C, but the N was too sharp. I write my N with a rounded arch. Evan writes his sharp. He had practiced. He had sat at his desk, perhaps while I was sleeping in the next room, and practiced forging my name until he felt confident enough to commit a felony. He had stolen $50,000 of equity from our home, my home, and handed it to the bank as a debt I was now legally responsible for. If Novarise failed, the bank would not just take his company, they would take my house. "Is everything okay?" Linda asked, noticing my silence. I looked up and smiled. It was a tight, brittle expression. "Yes, it is exactly what I expected it to be. Thank you, Linda." I walked out of the bank. The sun was shining on the pavement, but the world looked gray. I felt a profound sense of violation that went deeper than sexual infidelity. He had turned my identity into a tool for his own leverage. He had made me a hostage in my own life. Back in my home office, the rage had distilled into a cold, hard focus. I was no longer looking for reasons to leave. I was building a case. I logged into Evan's email again. I searched for the keywords Solstice Spirits, the brand he had mentioned on the phone during the humiliation of last night. There was a thread with the subject line, Proposal V4, National Tour Confidential. I opened the attachment. It was a slick PDF deck full of high-resolution photos of clinking glasses and crowded dance floors. It outlined a 20-city tour where Nova would exclusively pour Solstice vodka and gin. The contract value was massive, $200,000 upfront with performance bonuses based on attendance and consumption. I scrolled to the data section. This was where Evan tried to prove his worth. He had included case studies from his recent events at the Nebula Room. I knew these numbers. I had seen the real receipts in the bank account. The proposal claimed that the average attendance at his Thursday night events was 800 people. The fire capacity of the Nebula Room was 400. He claimed that the average spend per head was $75. The point of sale data I had glimpsed earlier showed an average of $30. He was inflating the metrics by over 100%. He was using a technique called phantom counting, where you double count guests who exit and re-enter, and you hire fillers, people paid to stand in line and look cool to create the illusion of demand. I read the fine print of the Solstice contract he was pushing to get signed. Guarantor Evan Cooper and Natalie Hayes Cooper. He had listed me again. He was using my credit history, my clean background, to vouch for a fraudulent business proposal. If Solstice Spirits found out the numbers were fake, and they would sue. And because my name was on the guarantee, they would come for my retirement fund. They would come for my salary. Evan was not just a cheater. He was a parasite. He was feeding on my stability to fuel his delusions of grandeur. I closed the browser and opened a new tab. I went to the website of a digital bank that had no physical branches in Ohio, somewhere Evan would never think to look. I'd opened a checking account under the name Natalie Hayes. I initiated a transfer. It was not a large amount, just $3,000, enough to rent an apartment for a month and buy food. It was under the limit that would trigger a suspicious activity report, and small enough that Evan, who never checked the balance unless his card was declined, might not notice immediately. Then I turned on the scanner. I fed the forged bank document into the machine. I fed the printouts of the Blue Nova payments into the machine. I fed the fraudulent Solstice proposal into the machine. The scanner whirred rhythmically, a mechanical heartbeat in the quiet room. Each document was converted into a PDF, encrypted, and uploaded to a secure cloud server that I had set up with two-factor authentication linked to a burner phone I kept in the lockbox. I stood up and looked at the wall above my desk. It was a blank expanse of white drywall. I took a roll of blue painter's tape and a stack of printed screenshots. I taped a photo of the nebular room on the left. I taped the logo of Solstice Spirits on the right. In the center, I placed a print out of the Blue Nova Consulting registration with Sabrina's name highlighted in yellow. I drew lines with a red marker connecting the money flows. Novarize, Blue Nova Sabrina, Home Equity, Novarize, the void. The diagram looked like the evidence boards I used to build for the state prosecutor. It was a map of corruption. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a small wallet-sized photo. It was from our wedding day. Evan was looking at me with that dazzling smile, and I was looking at him with total blind adoration. We looked happy. We looked like a team. I pinned the photo in the dead center of the web of lines. I took the red marker. I did not hesitate. I drew a thick, violent X across the photo, slashing through our faces. The marriage was no longer a relationship. It was not a partnership. It was just another node in his fraud scheme. It was a vulnerability that I had to patch. I capped the marker. The smell of the ink was sharp, like chemicals, like antiseptic. Project Divorce is live, I said to the empty room. The woman who cooked saffron risotto was dead. The woman standing in the office was the one who used to send men like Evan to federal prison, and she was just getting started. I stared at the name on the screen, the cursor blinking at the end of the email address. Julian Reed, Chief Financial Officer, Solstice Spirits. The name hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs. For a moment, the world of fraudulent invoices and shell companies vanished, replaced by the memory of a cramped university library study room, the smell of cheap energy drinks, and the warmth of a hand resting over mine on a computer mouse. Julian. 10 years ago, we had been inseparable. We were the only two students in our advanced data analytics cohort who actually enjoyed the beauty of a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. We had dated for 2 years, a relationship built on intellectual sparring and quiet understanding. We broke up not because we stopped loving each other, but because ambition pulled us in opposite directions. He went to corporate finance in New York, and I stayed in Chicago to chase fraudsters. I had not spoken to him in a decade, and now he was the man about to sign a multi-million-dollar check to my lying husband. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the bright Line Solace network. It was raining, a gray, miserable drizzle that blurred the windshield. I gripped the steering wheel, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had a choice. If I stayed silent, Solstice Spirits would sign the deal. Evan would get the money. He would likely continue his affair, emboldened by his success, and I would be legally tethered to a fraud that would eventually implode. If I reached out, I risked everything. I risked looking like the crazy, jealous ex-girlfriend trying to sabotage her former partner's new life. I risked looking like a bitter wife trying to ruin her husband's big break. But the forensic analyst in me knew the truth. This was not about jealousy. This was about a crime. And if Julian signed that contract, he would be an accessory. I pulled up LinkedIn on my phone. My thumb hovered over the message button. I typed, deleted, and typed again. I could not sound like a wife. I had to sound like a professional. Julian, I hope this message finds you well. I am writing to you not as an old friend, but regarding a professional matter that requires your immediate discretion. I have reason to believe that the due diligence data provided to your team by Novarize Entertainment contains significant statistical anomalies and fabricated metrics. I have documentation to support this. I think you should see it before you move forward. Please call me Natalie. I pressed send before I could talk myself out of it. I expected to wait days for a response. I expected to be ignored. My phone buzzed 3 minutes later. Natalie, my God, it has been a long time. I am free at 5:00. Here is my personal Zoom link. Use a secure connection. The hours until 5:00 dragged like years. I went through the motions at my job, approving budget requests for community gardens, but my mind was already in the interrogation room. At 5 sharp, I locked the door to my home office. Evan was out, likely at the gym or meeting a client code from meeting Sabrina. The house was quiet. I clicked the link. The video feed connected, and there he was. Julian Reed looked older. The messy hair of his 20s was now cut short and styled. He wore a crisp dress shirt and expensive glasses. He looked tired, the kind of deep-seated exhaustion that comes with high-level corporate responsibility. But when he saw me, his face softened. Natalie, he said. His voice was deeper than I remembered. You look exactly the same. I wish that were true, I said, my voice tight. Hi, Julian. I saw your last name, he said gently. Cooper, I assumed you married him, the owner of Novarize. Yes, I said. I did not offer more. I could not afford to let this become a catch-up session. Julian, thank you for taking the call. I know how this looks. The ex-girlfriend coming out of the woodwork to badmouth her husband's business, but I need you to listen to math, not history. Julian's expression shifted. He sat up straighter, the softness replaced by the sharp, analytical focus I remembered so well. Go ahead, I am listening. I shared my screen. I pulled up the side-by-side comparison I had created. On the left, the proposal Evan had sent to Solstice. On the right, the raw transaction data from the bank accounts. Look at the attendance figures for the Nebula Room events, I said, my voice steadying as I fell into the rhythm of the data. He claims an average of 800 heads per night. But if you look at the liquor consumption versus the door revenue, the variance is over 60%. You cannot have 800 people drinking only 30 people worth of alcohol. I highlighted the columns. He is phantom counting, I continued. He is cycling staff and unpaid fillers through the door to spike the clicker count for your scouts. And here the influencer marketing budget. It is a flat fee paid to a shell company called Blue Nova Consulting. It is not marketing, Julian. It is a kickback loop. Julian watched the screen in silence. He did not interrupt. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes scanning the rows of numbers. I saw him doing the mental math, verifying my conclusions in real time. When I finished, I stopped sharing the screen. The silence stretched between us. He forged my signature on a bank loan to fund the upfront costs for this proposal. I added quietly, that is how I found out. Julian took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He let out a long, heavy sigh. Natalie, he said, you have no idea how timely this is. What do you mean? Solstice is under audit, he said, lowering his voice even though he was alone in his office. The Federal Trade Commission is looking at our vendor contracts from the last 3 years. My predecessor played loose with the rules, kickbacks, inflated invoices, the works. I was brought in to clean it up. We are trying to show the regulators that we are running a legitimate, transparent operation now. My stomach dropped. Oh no. If we sign with Novarize, Julian said, looking directly at me, and it comes out that your husband is cooking the books, it will not just be a bad deal. The feds will see it as a continuation of the patent. They will indict the company. They will indict me for negligence. He looked at me with a mixture of horror and gratitude. You did not just save me from a bad contract, Nat. You might have saved me from prison. I do not want to destroy him just to destroy him, I said, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. The shame of admitting my husband was a criminal to the man I used to love was overwhelming. But I cannot let him drag me down with him. He made me a guarantor. Julian nodded slowly. We need to meet, not over Zoom. I need you to bring the raw files, the hard drives, the original documents with the forged signatures. I cannot leave Riverton easily. I said, Evan watches my schedule. Solstice has a regional office in Chicago. Julian said, I will be there tomorrow for a board review. Can you make it? Bring everything you have. We will go through it with my internal counsel. If what you say is true, we can build a firewall around you. Chicago, I repeated. It was a 4-hour drive. Natalie, Julian said softly, this is not me asking as your ex-boyfriend. This is the CFO of a multinational corporation asking a whistleblower to come forward. Are you safe to travel? Yes, I said. I can make it work. That night, the air in the kitchen felt suffocating. Evan was eating the takeout Thai food he had brought home, scrolling on his phone while chewing. I have to go to Chicago tomorrow, I said, keeping my back to him as I loaded the dishwasher. Evan looked up, a noodle hanging from his lip. Chicago. Bye. Bright Line is sending me to a regional nonprofit summit. I lied. The light tasted like ash in my mouth, but it came out smooth. It is just for 2 days. They want me to present on our data management for the community garden grant. It is boring stuff, but it is mandatory for the promotion. Evan's face brightened. He did not try to hide it. Oh, 2 days. That is great, babe. Good for you. I knew what he was thinking. 2 days without the wife. 2 days to bring Sabrina to our bed. 2 days to play the Bachelor King without having to sneak around. Yeah, he said, waving his fork magnanimously. You go do your little work thing. I have a ton of prep to do for the solstice launch anyway. It will be good for me to have the house quiet so I can focus. Focus, I repeated dryly. Right. Just do not call me every hour. Okay, he added, grinning. I will be in the zone. I promise. I said, you will not hear from me at all. The Solstice Spirits regional office in Chicago was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the river. It was a stark contrast to the dark, sticky, neon-lit world Evan inhabited. Here, the air was filtered and cool. People spoke in hushed, intelligent tones. It smelled of expensive espresso and ambition. I wore my best suit, a charcoal gray blazer that I hadn't worn since my interview at Bright Line. I carried a briefcase containing the USB drives and the file folders. Julian met me in the lobby. He did not hug me. He shook my hand, but his grip was firm and lingering. Thank you for coming, he said. He led me to a conference room on the 45th floor. Inside, there was a long mahogany table. Sitting there was a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper haircut. Solstice's internal counsel. This is Natalie Hayes. Julian introduced me. He used my maiden name. It felt like a reclamation. For the next 3 hours, I was not a victim. I was not a betrayed wife. I was the expert. I walked them through the data. I showed them the shell company registration. I showed them the variance charts. I explained the mechanics of the phantom counting. The lawyer took notes furiously. Julian watched me, a look of profound respect growing in his eyes. It was the same look he used to give me when we solved a complex data set in college, but deeper. It was admiration mixed with sadness for what I had endured. When we finished, the lawyer closed her folder. This is actionable, she said. If we move forward with the contract, but structure it specifically to catch these discrepancies during a live audit, we can terminate for cause and sue for fraud. We can hand him over to the authorities on a silver platter. She left the room to draft the paperwork. Julian and I were left alone with the view of the city's skyline. You are incredible, Julian said. You haven't lost a step. I feel like I have lost everything. I admitted, looking down at my hands. I built a life on a foundation of sand, Julian, and now I am the one who has to blow it up. Julian walked around the table and leaned against the edge close to me. You are not blowing it up, he said. You are escaping a burning building. There is a difference. He looked at the files on the table, then back at me. If we do this, if we set this trap for him at the launch event, it is going to destroy him. Julian said, not just his business, his reputation. He will face federal charges. He could go to prison for bank fraud and wire fraud. He paused, searching my eyes. And it means you will be in the middle of a federal investigation. You will be a witness against your husband. It is going to get ugly, and it is going to get very real. Are you ready for that? I thought of Evan's laugh on the phone. Don't like it? Divorce me. I thought of the forged signature. I thought of the empty I had spent trying to make myself smaller so he could feel big. I looked at Julian. He told me to divorce him. I said softly, I am just giving him exactly what he asked for. Okay, Julian said. He nodded, a grim determination setting his jaw. Then let's go to war. I drove back to Riverton with the Chicago skyline fading in my rear view mirror. My mind no longer a chaotic storm of hurt feelings, but a structured grid of tactical objectives. The weeping wife had been left behind on the interstate. The woman who returned was an operative. My first stop was a brick building on the edge of downtown Riverton, the office of Miriam Blake. Zoe had recommended her, calling her a shark in a silk blouse. Zoe was right. Miriam was in her 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that had seen every possible variation of marital betrayal. She did not offer me tea or sympathy. She pointed to the leather chair opposite her desk and opened a yellow legal pad. "Talk," she said, "and do not leave out the ugly parts." I told her everything. I started with the phone call. Don't like it. Divorce me, and moved through the discovery of Sabrina, the Blue Nova kickbacks, and the forged signature on the bank loan. I laid the copies of the documents on her desk. Miriam picked up the bank loan document, her eyes narrowing behind her reading glasses. "He forged your signature on a home equity line of credit," she stated, not asking. "That is not just grounds for divorce, Natalie. That is a felony. That is fraud. And it is the best gift he could have given us." "I do not feel like it is a gift," I said. "I feel like I'm going to lose my house." "You won't," Miriam said, her pen scratching aggressively against the paper, "because we are going to prove duress and fraud. But here's the hard part. You cannot go home and scream at him. You cannot throw his clothes on the lawn. You cannot let him know you know." She leaned forward, her expression deadly serious. "If you confront him now, he will hide assets. He will destroy digital records. He will transfer that Blue Nova money to an offshore account we can never touch. To win this, you have to be a good wife for 2 more weeks. Can you do that? Can you look at the man who stole $50,000 from you and ask him if he wants chicken or fish for dinner?" I thought about the red line I had drawn on my evidence wall. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." "Good," Miriam said, "because we are not just going for a settlement. We are going for a total extraction." That evening my phone rang. It was Julian. "I had someone who needs to speak with you," he said. "She is with the Treasury Department. Her name is Agent Carla Newen." My stomach tightened. "Put her on." The screen flickered and a new face appeared. Agent Carlwen looked like she was carved out of granite. She was young, perhaps my age, but she had the hard, unblinking stare of someone who spent her days hunting professional liars. "Mrs. Cooper," Carla said. Her voice was dry and devoid of pleasantries. "I have reviewed the files you provided to Mr. Reed. You are in a precarious position." "I am the victim here," I said defensively. "In the eyes of the law, you are a co-conspirator until proven otherwise." Carla cut in. "Your name is on the founding documents of Novarise. Your name is on the bank accounts. Your name is on the tax returns that failed to declare the income from these kickbacks. If we raid Novarise tomorrow without your cooperation, you go down with him. You are looking at a conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering." I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not know. "Ignorance is not a defense when you are an officer of the company," Carla said, "but cooperation is. We are opening a formal investigation into Novarise and its connection to the laundering network involving Sabrina Torres. We want to turn you into a cooperating witness. You help us, and we grant you immunity." "What do I have to do?" I asked. "We need to catch him in the act," Carla said, "not just past crimes. We need him to commit a federal offense while we are watching." 2 days later, we held a war council. It was a secure video conference. Miriam was in her office, framed by her wall of law books. Julian was in Chicago looking pale but determined. Carla was in an undisclosed location with a plain white wall behind her, and I was in my home office wearing noise-canceling headphones, so Evan, who was watching football downstairs, would not hear a word. "Here is the timeline," Julian said, pulling up a shared calendar. "The official launch of the Solstice Partnership is scheduled for next Saturday. It is a massive event at the Aurora Pulse nightclub in Las Vegas. It is going to be liveried nationwide." Las Vegas, Miriam mused. "High stakes, high visibility. Evan is obsessed with this night." I said he thinks it is his coronation. He thinks once he signs the final deal on stage, He will be untouchable. That is exactly where we get him, Carler said. Her eyes were cold. We are going to let the event proceed. Julian, your team will prepare the final contracts, but we are going to structure the affidavit of attendance, the document he has to sign to release the payment so that it specifically warrants the data we know is false. Perjury, Miriam said, nodding appreciatively, and wire fraud. The moment he transmits that signature across state lines. Exactly, Carler said. I will have agents inside the club. We will be posing as bartenders, security staff, and VIP guests. We will be recording everything, every conversation he has with Sabrina, every boast he makes about cooking the books. We need him to feel safe. We need him to feel arrogant. What is my role? I asked. You are the anchor, Miriam said. You provide the domestic cover. You keep him calm. You keep him feeling superior. And privately, you give me everything I need to file the divorce petition. I am going to draft an ex parte order to freeze all marital assets the moment the event starts. While he is on stage popping champagne, I will be hitting the enter key on the court filing. He wants to divorce me, I said, looking at the faces on the screen. He told me to do it, so I'm going to serve him the papers, but not at home. I looked at Julian. I want to serve him there, I said. At the club. That is theatrical, Carler said, frowning. We usually prefer quiet arrests. He humiliated her publicly, Miriam argued, tapping her pen. He has been using her credit and her name to build this fake empire. He challenged her to divorce him in front of his friends. I think a public response is not just fair. It is strategic. It rattles him. A rattled target makes mistakes. Carler considered this, then shrugged. Fine, as long as you do not interfere with the federal arrest, you can serve him however you want. I won't just serve him papers, I said. I want to dismantle the lying Julian. The screens at the club are controlled by the Nover team. Right. Technically, yes, Julian said, but the feed runs through the Solstice master server for the live stream. I have root access. Give me access, I said. Julian hesitated. Natalie, what are you planning? He loves the spotlight, I said. I just want to make sure the lighting is accurate. The meeting ended with a series of precise action items. Miriam would finalize the asset freeze. Carler would coordinate the surveillance team in Vegas. Julian would prep the trap contract. I sat in my office for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the football game downstairs. Evan shouted at the TV, a burst of aggressive masculine energy. I walked downstairs. Evan was sprawled on the sofa, a beer in his hand. He looked up as I entered. Hey, he said, not muttering an apology for the other night, not asking how I was. Can you bring me some chips? This game is intense. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had looked me in the eye and lied for years. I looked at the man who had turned me into a potential felon. Sure, I said. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt tight, like a mask that did not quite fit, but it was enough to fool him. Do you want the spicy ones? Yeah, babe. Thanks, he said, his eyes already drifting back to the screen. I walked into the kitchen. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a terrifying abundance of adrenaline. I was going to destroy him. I was going to take the house. I was going to take the car. I was going to take his reputation, his company, and his freedom. And I was going to do it while bringing him chicks. Miriam's question from the end of our meeting echoed in my mind. She had looked at me, her pen hovering over the divorce draft, and asked, Natalie, do you want to ruin him because we can just get your money and get out? You do not have to burn the earth. I had thought about the woman on the phone. Divorce her. I had thought about the forged signature. I had thought about the 10 years I spent making myself smaller so he would not feel threatened by my intelligence. I do not need to destroy him, I had told Miriam. He built a house of cards. I just need to turn on the fan. I just need to pull back the curtain so everyone can see the small sad man standing behind the wizard. I grabbed the bag of chips from the pantry. I walked back into the living room and set the bowl down next to him. Thanks, he grunted. Evan, I said softly. He did not look away from the TV. I think I might come to Vegas, I said. To watch the launch, support you from the sidelines. He stiffened. I saw the panic flare in his eyes before he quickly masked it. He turned to me. putting on his best caring husband face. "Oh, Matt, I don't know," he said. "It is going to be a work trip. Crazy hours, loud music. You hate that stuff. You would be miserable." "You are right," I said, retreating instantly. "I would probably just be in the way. I will just watch the live stream from home." He relaxed, his shoulders dropping to him. "Exactly. You watch from here. It will be better. I will give you a shout out." "Okay," I said. "I will be watching." I turned and walked away before he could see the cold, hard satisfaction in my eyes. He had just bought the lie. He thought he was safe. He thought he was going to Vegas to become a king. He had no idea he was buying a one-way ticket to his own execution. The house began to change, not because the furniture moved, but because I had stopped filling the empty spaces with my effort. For years, our marriage had run on the fuel of my accommodation. I cooked because he liked hot meals. I asked about his day because he needed an audience. I waited up because he hated coming home to a dark house. Now I stopped. I stopped cooking dinner at 6:00. If Evan came home hungry, he found a clean kitchen and me reading a book in the living room. I stopped asking where he had been. When he offered vague, mumbled explanations about client dinners or site visits, I simply nodded and turned a page. Cool. I would say busy. It drove him crazy, though he would never admit it. He was used to my pestering. He was used to my worry. My silence made him twitchy. He would glance at me while I drank my morning coffee, waiting for the interrogation that never came. He did not know that I wasn't asking questions because I already had all the answers stored on an encrypted hard drive in a bank vault. I needed to secure my physical safety as much as my legal standing. That meant driving out to the edge of town where the paved roads turned to gravel and the cell service became spotty. My younger brother, Luke, lived in a small refurbished cabin near the reservoir. We had not spoken properly in 2 years. Evan had called Luke a loser with no ambition at Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago because Luke preferred carpentry to corporate climbing. I had taken Evan's side, terrified of a scene. It was one of my biggest regrets. I pulled my sedan up to the cabin. Luke was on the porch sanding a piece of reclaimed oak. He stopped when he saw me. He looked wary, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Natalie," he said. He didn't smile. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, stepping out of the car. "You were right about him, Luke. You were right about everything." Luke's shoulders dropped. He motioned for me to come up the steps. We sat on the porch swing, drinking lukewarm lemonade, and I told him a sanitized version of the truth. I told him we were separating. I told him it was going to get ugly. I asked if in the worst-case scenario I could sleep on his couch for a few weeks. "You do not even have to ask," Luke said. He looked at me, struggling with something. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out his phone. "I did not know if I should ever show you this," he said quietly. "I took them 2 months ago. I thought if I showed you, you would just hate me for being the messenger." He handed me the phone. The photos were taken from a distance through the trees, but the resolution was clear. It was a different cabin, a rental property on the other side of the lake. There was Evan's white BMW. The license plate was clearly visible, and on the porch of that rental cabin, there was Evan. He was not working. He was standing behind a woman with dark hair, Sabrina. His arms were wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. They looked comfortable. They looked like a couple. I checked the rental log. Luke said he booked it under Novri Corporate Retreat, but it was just them for the whole weekend. I stared at the image. It was the smoking gun that Miriam, my lawyer, had dreamed of. Proof of adultery, proof of misappropriation of company funds for personal leisure. "Send these to me," I said. My voice did not shake. "They are perfect." Luke looked at me with a mixture of sadness and relief. "You are different, Nat. You sound cold." "I am not cold," I said, handing the phone back. "I am just deficient." The preparation continued. I treated my exit like a military extraction. I rented a small safety deposit box at a bank across town. Over the course of 3 days, I slowly moved the things that actually mattered to me out of the house. I took my birth certificate and my passport. I took the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me in her will. I took the hard drive containing the backup of my evidence. I left the diamond necklace Evan had bought me after his first big payout, the one I knew he had bought to assuage his guilt over an affair. I left the expensive designer bags he insisted I carry to look the part of a successful CEO's wife. Those were props. They belonged to the character of Mrs. Cooper, and she was being written out of the script. But the hardest preparation was not logistical. It was mental. Agent Carolyn Wynne was thorough. She insisted that if I was going to be a federal witness, I needed to be psychologically vetted. She set up a session with a therapist who contracted with the Bureau, a woman named Dr. Aries, who specialized in high-stress trauma. I sat in Dr. Aries's office staring at a white noise machine. "You are angry, Doctor," Aries said. It was not a question. "I am furious," I admitted. "I want to burn his house down. I want to scream at him until my throat bleeds. But I can't. I have to smile and ask if he wants salt on his eggs." "The suppression of rage is dangerous, Doctor," Iris said gently. "If you do not acknowledge it, it will sabotage you. You might snap at the wrong moment. You might tip him off." "I won't snap," I said. "I am channeling it." "Into what?" "Into accuracy," I said. "Every time I want to scream, I find other discrepancies in his ledger. Every time I want to cry, I scan another invoice. I am not letting the hate eat me, Doctor. I am using it as fuel. Once this is over, then I will collapse, but not yet." Dr. Aris nodded slowly. "Just remember, Natalie, justice is a legal outcome. Revenge is an emotional one. Do not confuse the two. If you do this only to hurt him, you will feel empty when he is gone. You have to do this to save yourself, to save myself." That afternoon, I went to a salon I had never been to before for 5 years. I had kept my hair long and highlighted blonde because Evan said it looked classy. He liked to run his fingers through it while he lied to me. "Cut it," I told the stylist. "How short?" she asked. "To the chin," I said, "and dye it back to my natural color, dark brown." When I looked in the mirror an hour later, the stranger staring back at me looked sharp. She looked serious. She looked like the woman who used to lead investigations, not the woman who waited by the phone. I went to a department store and bought a tailored black blazer and pants that fit my actual body, not the tight dresses Evan preferred. I was shedding my skin. Evan, conversely, was expanding his. As the date of the solstice launch in Las Vegas approached, his arrogance ballooned. He was barely home. He was out every night promoting the brand. I saw his posts on social media. He was using the phrase constantly now. He posted a photo of himself popping a bottle of champagne with the caption, "Living life on my terms. Don't like it. Divorce me." It had become his slogan. His friends thought it was hilarious. They commented with fire emojis and laughing faces. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the phrase was a display of power, a way of saying he was too big to be constrained by a nagging wife. He did not know he was quoting his own death sentence. 2 nights before the flight to Vegas, I was walking past his home office door. It was slightly ajar. I heard his voice low and excited. "Babe, listen to me," he was saying. "Once this solstice check clears, we are gone. I am serious." I stopped. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath. "I am done with Ohio," Evan continued. "Riverton is dead weight. I already looked at a penthouse in West Hollywood. We open the LA branch, and we leave the Midwest to the losers." There was a pause as Sabrina spoke on the other end. Then Evan laughed. "Natalie, please. She is clueless. I will leave her the house and the mortgage. By the time she realizes the business accounts are empty, we will be drinking mimosas on Sunset Boulevard. She can have the debt. I am taking the future." The coldness that washed over me was absolute. It was not just about cheating anymore. It was not just about the embarrassment. He was planning to abandon me with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. He was planning to use me as the landfill for his financial toxic waste while he started a new life with my money. I walked quietly back to my room. I sat at my desk and pulled out a single sheet of lined paper. I picked up a pen. I wrote down everything. I wrote about the day we met. I wrote about the way he used to look at me. I wrote about the lies. I wrote about the humiliation of the phone call. I wrote about the plan to leave me destitute. I poured every ounce of heartbreak, every shred of lingering love and every drop of grief onto the page. I cried while I wrote it. I let the tears smudged the ink. Then I took the letter into the bathroom. I placed it in the empty ceramic sink. I struck a match. I watched the flame catch the corner of the paper. I watched the words curl and turn to black ash. I watched I loved you turn into smoke. I watched you betrayed me crumble into dust. I rammed the faucet, washing the gray sludge down the drain. The grief was gone. Only the mission remained. I walked back to the bedroom on the nightstand. Next to the lamp sat a printed boarding pass. Passenger Natalie Hayes. Destination Las Vegas. MV. Date Friday, October 27th. I opened my phone and looked at the shared calendar. Evan had blocked out the entire weekend. Vegas Aurora Pulse Solstice launch night. My flight landed 2 hours before his. I looked at the empty side of the bed where he wouldn't be sleeping tonight. You told me to divorce you. I whispered to the empty room. Okay, but you are going to remember that night for the rest of your life. Las Vegas hit me the moment the automatic doors of the airport slid open. It was a physical assault of dry heat, exhaust fumes, and the sweet cloying scent of desperation disguised as luxury. I had arrived 24 hours ahead of my husband. I was not staying at the flashy casino resort where Nova Rise had booked a block of suites. I checked into a sleek, non-gaming hotel tower further down the strip, handing the concierge a credit card that read Natalie Hayes. "Welcome to Las Vegas, Miss Hayes." The receptionist said, "We have put you on the 42nd floor as requested. You have a direct view of the Aurora Pulse complex." "Thank you," I said. "Do not put any calls through to the room. I am here to work." My room was cool and smelled faintly of white tea. I did not unpack clothes. I unpacked evidence. Within an hour, the king-sized bed was no longer a place to sleep. It was a topographical map of Evan Cooper's destruction. I organized the piles with the precision of the investigator I used to be. On the left pillow sat the divorce pile, the petition Miriam had drafted, the freeze orders, the proof of adultery. In the center lay the financial pile, the blue Nova invoices, the forged bank documents, the phantom attendance records. On the right was the federal pile, the statutes regarding wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Outside my floor-to-ceiling window, the strip was waking up. The neon lights began to flicker on, painting the desert sky in shades of bruised purple and toxic green. Down there, thousands of people were drinking to forget their lives. Up here, I was remembering every single detail of mine. There was a knock at the door. I checked the peephole. It was Julian Reed. He looked out of place in Vegas. He was wearing a dark suit, without a tie, clutching a leather portfolio as if it contained nuclear codes. When I opened the door, the noise of the hallway slot machine seemed to vanish behind the heavy seal of the room. "You have a war room," Julian said, looking at the bed. "I like to see the battlefield," I replied. "Do you have it?" Julian opened the portfolio and handed me a thick document bound with a binder clip. "This is the final execution copy of the Solstice Partnership Agreement. My legal team added the clauses we discussed with Agent and Gwen. Look at page 14. I flipped to the page there. Buried in the standard legalese about liability and insurance was a new section titled Data Integrity and Vendor Warranty. By signing this, Julian explained, his voice tight, "Evan is personally certifying under penalty of perjury that all historical data regarding attendance and revenue provided during the due diligence phase is 100% accurate. He is also certifying that no third-party vendors are owned by any officer of Novarise. He will never read it." I said, "He never reads the contracts. He just looks at the payout number on page 1 and signs." "Exactly," Julian said, "and the moment he signs it and hands it to me, he has committed fraud against a federally regulated entity. And because the event is being liveried and the funds are being wired across state lines, the FBI has jurisdiction." The door opened again. This time it was Agent Carla Newen. She was not wearing her government blazer. She was dressed in a shimmering silver cocktail dress, her hair teased up in a high-volume style. She looked like a high roller's girlfriend, except for the earpiece she was discreetly tucking behind her hair. "The team is in place," Carla said, walking to the window and looking down at the Aurora Pulse Club, which was glowing red in the distance. "I have 2 agents working the VIP bar. I have one in the sound booth, and I have one embedded in Evan's entourage posing as a regional PR consultant." "How is he?" I asked. "He is manic," Carler said. "He has been drinking since he landed. He is treating the staff like garbage. But I have some news that might interest you." Carler turned from the window, her expression grim. "We picked up Sabrina Torres 3 days ago," she said. I froze. "But not for this," Carla clarified. "Sabrina was moving cash for an ecstasy distribution ring out of Miami. We squeezed her. She rolled over on everyone to save her own skin. She gave us the Blue Nova accounts. She gave us the text messages where Evan instructs her on how to structure the invoices to avoid tax flags." I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my chest. "So she is working for you. She is a cooperating witness." Carler said she has no choice. "She is terrified. If she tips Evan off, her deal is void and she goes to prison for 15 years. So right now she has to act like the loving mistress, knowing that the moment the handcuffs go on him, she is the one who put them there." The twist was delicious. Evan thought he was the conductor of this orchestra. He thought he was playing me, playing Solstice, playing the system. In reality, he was the only person in the entire city who did not know the music had stopped. He was standing on a trap door holding hands with a woman who had already sold him out. "He is alone," I whispered. "He just doesn't know it yet." My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a FaceTime request from my husband. I took a deep breath. I sat in the armchair away from the bed, covered in evidence. I angled the camera so only the generic beige wall was visible behind me. I put on a soft, tired smile. I answered. "Hey, baby." Evan's face filled the screen. He was in a penthouse suite at Caesar's Palace. The background was chaotic waiters moving back and forth, music thumping, a view of the fountains. He looked shiny. His eyes were bright and glassy. "Hi, Evan," I said. "You look busy." "It is madness here," he shouted. Oh, I could tell he was loving every second of it. He panned the camera around to show off the suite. "Look at this place. Solstice really rolled out the red carpet. They know who the king is." I saw Sabrina in the background of the shot. She was sitting on a velvet sofa checking her phone. She looked pale. When Evan panned the camera near her, she forced a quick, brittle smile and looked away. She knew. "I just wanted to call and say goodnight," Evan said, turning the camera back to himself. "I had a big dinner with the investors. Might go late. You know how it is." "I know," I said. "Good luck with the launch tomorrow. I hope it is everything you deserve." "Oh, it will be." He grinned. "You just watch the live stream." "Okay. Stay home. Get some rest. Do not wait up." "I will be watching." I promised. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I hung up. The screen went black. The silence in my room felt heavy, charged with the static electricity of the coming storm. The next evening, the night of the launch, I stood on the balcony of my hotel room. The desert heat was still radiating off the concrete below, but the air up here was thin and cool. It was 8:00. The Aurora Pulse Club was a beacon of light in the center of the strip. Skywreckers swept the darkness, crossing beams over the massive domed roof. A long line of black limousines began to snake toward the VIP entrance. I used a pair of compact binoculars to watch the arrival. The lead car stopped. The door opened. Evan stepped out. He was wearing a white dinner jacket, a choice that screamed arrogance. He paused on the red carpet, buttoning the jacket, waiting for the cameras to find him. He extended a hand back into the car. Sabrina emerged. She was wearing a dress made of red sequins that looked like fresh blood under the camera flashes. She took his arm. They posed. Evan pointed at the signage, laughing, soaking in the attention. Sabrina's smile was tight. She kept glancing around, likely looking for the federal agents she knew were watching her. I lowered the binoculars. From this height, they looked like ants, insignificant, small. My phone chimed with a secure message from Carla. "Incoming intel from the embedded agent. You need to see this." It was a screenshot. Evan had created a group chat named Vegas Kings with 4 of his college friends. The timestamp was 2 minutes ago, sent from inside the limousine. "Evan, tonight is the night. Boys signing the 8-figure deal. Changing the game. Friend 1 legend. Friend 2. What about the ball and chain? Is she going to let you spend it? Evan, if tonight goes well, I am pulling the trigger. I am done. I want to live in LA. She is dead weight. Like I told her, don't like it. Divorce me. She is too scared to do anything. I am going to cut her loose and leave her the mortgage. Watch me. I stared at the text. She is too scared to do anything. The last vestige of hesitation evaporated. If there had been a tiny foolish part of me that wondered if I was being too harsh, if I was going too far by working with the FBI, that part died right there on the balcony. He was not just leaving me. He was laughing about destroying me. He viewed me as dead weight to be discarded once he had extracted enough value. I looked at the text again. Don't like it. Divorce me. I am not scared, Evan, I said to the wind. I am just prepared. I went back inside the room. I walked to the closet. I did not put on a suit. I did not put on a colorful party dress. I put on a dress of black silk. It was severe, elegant, and sharp. It had long sleeves and a high neck, but the back was open. It was a dress for a woman who was in mourning, or a woman who was the executioner. I fastened a simple silver chain around my neck. I put on my heels. I picked up my phone and the small encrypted tablet that linked to the Solstice server. I checked my reflection in the full-length mirror. Natalie Cooper, the frantic, worried wife, was gone. The woman in the mirror was cold. Her eyes were dry. She was ready to work. I walked to the door. I was not going to the VIP section. I was not going to the dance floor. I was heading to the control room at the back of the club where the screens were managed, where the reality was manufactured. It was time to rewrite the script. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The elevator ride down took 40 seconds. It felt like the countdown to a launch. The bass did not just play. It detonated. It was a seismic force that rattled the glass partition of the control booth where I stood. Below me, the main floor of the Aurora Pulse nightclub was a churning ocean of bodies, illuminated by sweeping lasers that cut through the haze of artificial fog in violent slashes of neon green and ultraviolet. I looked down at the chaos from the darkened sanctuary of the tech room to the 1,000 people dancing below. This was the party of the year. To me, it was a crime scene that had not been taped off yet. Audio levels are good, the sound engineer said, adjusting a slider on the massive mixing board. Feeds are clean. I stood next to Julian and Agent Carler and Gwen. The room was cold, lit only by the bank of 30 HFN monitors covering every inch of the club. Target is moving to the VIP stage, Carler said, her voice cutting through the muffled thumping of the music. She tapped a screen. Monitor 4 zoomed in. Evan Cooper walked onto the raised platform like he owned gravity. He was wearing a white dinner jacket that glowed under the black lights. His teeth were bleached, his hair was perfect, and his arm was clamped possessively around Sabrina Tarrers. She was smiling, but I saw the way her eyes darted toward the exits. She knew the agents were already in the room. Look at him, Julian whispered, half in disgust, half in awe. He has no idea. He is wearing a wire, Carla reminded us. Well, not him. The Solstice representative sat next to him. I looked at Monitor 6, a man in a dark suit. Agent Miller, posing as a senior VP from Solstice, was leaning in close to Evan, shouting to be heard over the music. Carler unmuted the specific audio channel from Miller's lapel microphone. Evan's voice flooded our small room, stripped of the club's reverb, sounding tiny and arrogant. I told you, Mike. Evan was shouting, gesturing with a glass of champagne. I own these managers. I grease the palms of every floor manager in the district. You want Solstice in the Wells. It is done. I promised you volume. I got you volume. And the attendance numbers, Miller asked, leading him. They look high. Evan, are you sure they are solid? Evan laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. Brother, the numbers are whatever I say they are. I got guys at the door clicking the counter twice for every hot girl that walks in. We pack the line with fillers to make the photos look good. Perception is reality, right? Perception is wire fraud, I said softly to the screen on the main stage. The music dipped. The DJ grabbed the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed. Welcome to the future of nightlife tonight. Nova Entertainment joins forces with Solstice Spirits to bring you the biggest tour in the country. The crowd roared. Confetti cannons blasted gold glitter into the air. A table was wheeled out onto the center of the stage. On it lay a leather binder. The contract. "Here we go," Julian said. He crossed his arms, his knuckles white. Evan stepped up to the table. He picked up the heavy gold-plated pen Solstice had provided. He played to the crowd, holding the pen up like a sword. He looked directly into the camera that was live streaming to the Solstice corporate website and thousands of viewers online. "This is for the believers," Evan yelled. He bent down. He signed the first page. He flipped it. He signed the second page. "That is the liability waiver," Julian narrated quietly. Evan flipped to the final page, the one with the hidden clause warranting the data integrity. He did not read a single word. He slashed his signature across the line with a flourish. "And that," Carler said, checking her watch, "is a felony." Evan threw the pen into the crowd. He grabbed the microphone. "We did it," he screamed. "Novarize is going national." The DJ cut the track. The lights dimmed to a single spotlight on Evan. This was the moment Julian had scripted with the MC. "Evan, my man," the MC shouted. "Huge night for you. You are going to be on the road a lot now. Any words for the wife back home in Ohio?" It was the perfect setup. A normal man would have said, "I love you," or "I wish you were here." Evan wiped sweat from his forehead. He grinned, fueled by adrenaline, vodka, and the roar of the crowd. He looked into the lens. "If she is watching," Evan said, his voice dripping with condescension, "she better get used to the view. This is my world now. And like I told her on the phone, if you don't like it, divorce me." The crowd cheered. Someone whistled. It was a triumph of toxic bravado. "Now," I said to the technician. Carla nodded. "Execute." The technician pressed a single key. Behind Evan, the massive LED wall that spanned 40 feet wide and 20 feet tall flickered. The Solstice logo vanished. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. It was colossal. The cells were sharp and high contrast. The crowd's cheering faltered as people squinted, confused. It was not a graphic. It was a ledger. "What is that?" someone in the VIP section asked. The audio picked it up. Then my voice boomed through the club's massive speaker system. It was not live. It was the recording I had made in the studio yesterday. Calm, professional, and deadly clear. "The attendance figures for Novari events are statistically impossible," my voice explained. The tone was like a narrator in a documentary. "The red columns indicate phantom guests attendees that do not exist, created to inflate ticket revenue." On the screen, red bars shot up, highlighting the fake numbers. Evan turned around. He looked at the screen. He blinked confused, thinking it was some kind of avant-garde visual effect. "The marketing budget," my voice continued, "is being diverted to a shell company known as Blue Nova Consulting." The screen shifted. A diagram appeared. It showed money flowing from Solstice through Nova Rise into Blue Nova and then directly into a personal account. The owner of Blue Nova is Sabrina Torres. A giant photo of Sabrina's driver's license appeared on the screen right next to a bank statement showing the transfer. The crowd went silent. The music had stopped completely. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and my voice dismantling Evan's life. Sabrina, standing next to him, covered her face with her hands and stepped back. Evan stood frozen. His mouth hung open. The microphone dangled in his hand. Then the audio shifted. The speakers crackled with the sound of a phone call recording. The background noise was the thumping bass of the Nebula Room from weeks ago. "I am working, baby. You're always so dramatic." Evan's voice echoed through the club, then clear as a bell. "I am at the club. Don't like it. Divorce me." A date and time stamp appeared on the screen. October 12th, 11:50, 8 p.m. The silence in the club broke. It was replaced by a low, ugly murmur. People were pointing. The king of nightlife had just been exposed as a fraud and a bully on a 40-foot screen. Evan snapped. He spun toward the DJ booth, his face turning a violent shade of red. "Cut it," he screamed. His voice cracked. "Cut the feed. Turn it off." He waved frantically at the sound guy. "Kill the scream. It is a hack. I am being hacked." The DJ looked up at the control booth where I was standing. He did not touch the faders. He crossed his arms. Evan looked up. He followed the DJ's gaze through the tinted glass of the control room, illuminated by the glow of the monitors. I stepped forward. I stood right at the window. I knew. He could not see my face clearly, just a silhouette in a black dress looking down on him like a judge. But he knew. I saw the recognition hit him. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed the edge of the DJ table to hold himself up. "Natalie," he mouthed. The microphone picked up the whisper on the floor. The movement began. 4 men in dark polo shirts, federal agents, pushed through the confused crowd near the stage. 2 more emerged from the kitchen entrance. Sabrina saw them coming. She did not run. She simply sat down on a speaker, putting her head in her hands, waiting to be processed. She had made her deal. Evan looked left. He looked right. The bravado was gone. The Vegas king was gone. He looked like a trapped animal. "This is not real," he yelled at the crowd, but his voice was shaking. "This is a deep fake. My wife is crazy." "Mr. Cooper," Agent Miller said, stepping up onto the stage and pulling a badge from his jacket. "Federal agents, please put the microphone down." Up in the booth, I turned away from the window. I did not need to see the handcuffs go on. I knew exactly how they sounded. I pulled my phone from my clutch. My thumb hovered over the screen. I had drafted the text message an hour ago to Evan Cooper, CC Miriam Blake, attorney. Linda Cooper, mother. The Vegas Kings group chat message. "You said don't like it. Divorce me. I accepted your challenge." The divorce petition was filed electronically 5 minutes ago. The assets are frozen. The house is secured. And the evidence on the screen, that is my parting gift. You wanted the spotlight, Evan. You got it. Do not hurry home. The locks have been changed. I looked at the message. It was cruel. It was necessary. It was the final severance of the cord that had tied me to a sinking ship for 10 years. Below me, I heard the sound of a microphone dropping to the floor with a harsh feedback screech. I pressed send. The giant LED screen looming over the dance floor was a wall of incriminating red bars and jagged graphs. But for Evan Cooper, the real explosion was happening in the pocket of his white dinner jacket. His phone was vibrating. It was not the short, polite buzz of a social meteorite. It was a continuous, frantic pulse. It felt like a warning siren pressed against his hip. He pulled it out. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the device onto the confetti-strewn floor around him. The music had died, replaced by the murmurs of 1,000 confused clubgoers and the screech of feedback from the dropped microphone. The screen was bright in the gloom. The notification banner was at the top. "Natalie," he tapped it. The message opened. It was long, precise, and it hit him harder than the bass ever had. "You said don't like it. Divorce me. Okay, I choose divorce. But before I file the paperwork, I am returning all the secrets you dumped on me." Below the text, the attachments loaded one by one, spinning for a fraction of a second before resolving into clear, brutal previews. File petition for dissolution of bar marriage filed 10. PDF file. Emergency asset freeze order granted. PDF file. Affidavit of forgery Riverton Bank. PDF. Evan stared. The words swam before his eyes. Forgery. Freeze order. Then came a screenshot. It was an email from the corporate account of Solstice Spirits sent to the General Novarize inbox. The timestamp was 2 minutes ago. Subject notice of immediate termination for cause by due to discovered irregularities in vendor data and potential violation of federal wire fraud statutes. Solstice Spirits is hereby terminating all agreements with Novarize Entertainment effective immediately. We have notified our legal counsel and the relevant authorities. It was over. The deal he had just signed on stage was not a contract. It was a confession. Then the final image loaded. It was a photo taken from the driveway of our house in Riverton. It showed a large moving truck parked on the lawn. There were cardboard boxes stacked by the door, each labeled Cooper in thick black marker. And zoomed in on the front door knob was a brand new shiny brass lock. Under the photo, I had written a caption. "I moved the things you can legally take. The rest belongs to the court order." And then the final text bubble. "You are standing in a club thinking you are untouchable. But the real world is happening somewhere else. If you want to salvage anything, you had better run home right now. The authorities have been notified. I will not cover for you for one more second." Evan looked up from the phone. His face was a mask of sheer terror. The men in the dark polo shirts were moving faster now. They were climbing the stairs to the stage. One of them, a man with a buzzbat and a badge hanging from his neck, locked eyes with Evan. "Mr. Cooper," the agent shouted over the noise of the crowd. "Federal agents, we need to step into a private room now next to Evan." Sabrina Tars saw the agents. She saw the panic in Evan's eyes. She saw the text message over his shoulder. For a second, she looked like she might try to play the part of the devoted partner. She reached out, grabbing the sleeve of his white jacket. "Evan," she squeaked. "Evan, what is going on? Let go of me." Evan snarled. He shoved her hand away. A security guard briefed by Carla stepped between them. "Ms. Towers, you are coming with us," the guard said, grabbing her arm firmly. Sabrina screamed, a sharp piercing sound that cut through the tension. That scream broke Evan's paralysis. The survival instinct that had driven him to lie, cheat, and steal for a decade kicked into overdrive. He looked at the agents closing in from the left. He looked at the VIP stairs on the right. He did not surrender. He did not ask for a lawyer. He ran. He threw himself off the back of the stage, landing awkwardly on the concrete floor of the service corridor. His expensive Italian shoes slipped on a spilled drink. He scrambled up, panting, his white jacket tearing at the shoulder seam. "Hey, stop him!" an agent yelled. Evan burst through the double doors marked emergency exit. The heat of the Las Vegas night hit him like a physical blow. He was in the alleyway behind the club. It smelled of rotting garbage and stale beer. He did not look back. He sprinted down the alley, his lungs burning, the sound of his own footsteps echoing against the brick walls. He was the king of nightlife 10 minutes ago. Now he was a fugitive in a torn suit running past dumpsters. He reached the main street, hailing a taxi with frantic waves of his arms. The yellow cab screeched to a halt. "Airport," Evan gasped, throwing himself into the back seat. "Harry Reid International, go." The driver looked at him in the rear-view mirror at the sweat, the wild eyes, the torn jacket, but said nothing. He punched the accelerator. Evan pulled his phone out again. He tried to open his banking app. Access denied. Account locked. He tried the credit card app. Account suspended. Contact issuer. "No," he whispered, his thumb jabbing at the screen. "No, no, no." We had frozen everything. Every dollar he thought he had stashed, every line of credit he thought was his safety net, was behind a wall of encryption and caught orders. The taxi pulled up to the departures terminal. $28, the driver said. Evan patted his pockets. He pulled out his sleek black metal Nova corporate card. He handed it to the driver. The driver swiped it on his mobile terminal. "Declined," the driver said flatly. "Try it again." Evan snapped, sweat dripping down his nose. "It is a platinum card. It has a $50,000 limit. It says declined." "Buddy," the driver said, his patience thinning. "You got cash." Evan dug into his wallet. He found 3 crumpled $20 bills, his personal cash stash. He threw them at the driver and scrambled out of the car without waiting for change. He ran to the ticket counter. He needed the first flight to Ohio. He needed to get to the house. He needed to destroy the hard drives in his office before the feds got there. He did not know that I had already scanned them. He did not know the feds were already on their way to Riverton. 1 seat to Columbus. Evan panted to the agent at the counter. "Now, first class." "I have a red eye leaving in 40 minutes," the agent said, typing slowly. "First class is full. I have a middle seat in economy." "Fine," Evan yelled. "Just book it." He handed her the corporate card again. It was a reflex. "Sir, this card is invalid," the agent said loud enough for the people in line behind him to hear. Evan's face burned. He pulled out his personal debit card, the one linked to the account I had drained to pay the retainer from Miriam and the forensic team. There was barely enough left for the ticket. "Try this one," he whispered. It went through. 20 minutes later, Evan Cooper sat in seat 34B. He was wedged between a woman holding a crying baby and a man eating a pungent tuna sandwich. He was still wearing his torn white dinner jacket, but now it looked like a costume from a failed play. The plane began to taxi. Evan turned on his phone for one last check before takeoff. The notifications cascaded down the screen like a waterfall of ruin. Email from Miriam Blake. Notice of divorce proceedings and restraining order. Email from Riverton Regional Bank. Urgent inquiry regarding fraudulent activity. Email from Solstice Legal. Cease and desist order. Text from his mother, Evan. Liar police at your house. Natalie is not answering. He shut his eyes. He pressed the phone against his forehead. The vibration of the engines roared to life, pushing him back into the cramped seat. He was trapped in a metal tube, hurtling through the dark toward a home that was no longer his, to a wife who had become his executioner. High above the strip, on the 42nd floor of my hotel, I stood by the window. The room was quiet. The evidence on the bed had been packed away. The war room was closed. I held my phone in my hand. I had a flight tracker app open. I watched the small airplane icon labeled Flight 782, Las Vegas to Columbus, begin its crawl across the screen. I watched it accelerate down the runway. I watched the status change to departed. I took a sip of water. My hands were steady. Evan was running home. He thought he could fix it. He thought he could talk his way out of it, just like he had talked his way out of every other mess in his life. He thought if he just got to me, he could charm me or bully me or scare me into recanting. He did not understand that the Natalie he knew was gone. She had boarded a flight out of her old life a long time ago. I looked at the plane climbing into the dark desert sky. You wanted freedom, Evan, I said softly to the glass. Okay, you are free, but freedom has a bill to pay. I turned away from the window and picked up my purse. It was time to go home and finish this. The sky over Riverton was a bruised shade of slate gray. It was 6:00 in the morning. The air was heavy with the damp chill that settles over the Midwest in late October, a stark contrast to the dry recycled air of the airplane cabin or the scorching heat of the Nevada desert. The street was silent. The manicured lawns and the white picket fences looked exactly as they always did, indifferent to the fact that my life had just imploded and rebuilt itself in the span of 48 hours. The yellow taxi turned the corner. Its engines sputtered as it slowed down in front of our driveway. I was watching from the window of Miriam Blake's black sedan, parked 3 houses down. Beside me, Miriam sat with a file folder on her lap, sipping coffee from a thermos. In the front seat of the police cruiser, parked in front of us, 2 officers were waiting. The taxi door opened. Evan Cooper stepped out. He looked like a man who had been chewed up by the world and spat back out. His white dinner jacket was gone, replaced by a wrinkled dress shirt with a coffee stain down the front. His eyes were sunk deep into his skull, rimmed with dark purple circles. He did not walk. He stumbled. He did not pay the driver. I watched him throw a credit card through the window, shout something when the driver likely refused it, and then toss his watch onto the passenger seat before sprinting toward the house. He was running. He was running toward the sanctuary he had threatened to leave. He was running toward the wife he had called boring. He was running home because it was the last place on earth where he thought he still had authority. He reached the front porch. He grabbed the brass handle of the front door. He twisted it. It did not budge. He twisted it again harder, rattling the frame. He shoved his shoulder against the wood. Natalie, he screamed. His voice was cracked from hours of panic. Open the door. It is me. Open the damn door. Above his head, the new security camera I had installed 2 days ago blinked blue. A robotic synthesized voice projected from the small speaker, loud enough to echo in the quiet morning air. This property is secure. The locks have been changed. If you are Evan Cooper, please remain where you are. Law enforcement has been notified. Evan froze. He stared at the camera lens as if it were a monster. He whispered. Then he hammered his fist against the wood. Natalie, baby, stop playing games. Let me in. Miriam nodded to the officers. The police cruiser rolled forward silently, its lights flashing once a short blue burst before stopping directly behind Evan's taxi. Miriam started her engine and pulled up alongside them. I opened the back door and stepped out. The morning air felt cold on my face, but I was warm. I was wearing a thick, oversized wool sweater and my oldest pair of jeans. I wore no makeup. My hair was clean and brushed. I did not look like the glamorous, vengeful woman in the black dress who had stood in the control booth in Vegas. I looked like the woman who lived here. I looked like the reality he had tried to escape. Evan, I said. He spun around. He looked at the police officers getting out of their car, hands resting near their belts. He looked at Miriam, who was stepping out with her briefcase. Then he looked at me. Natalie, he breathed. He took a step toward me, his hands reaching out. Oh my God, baby, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them to leave. Step back, sir, one of the officers said. His voice was calm, but commanded instant obedience. He held up a hand. Do not approach, Mrs. Cooper. Evan stopped. He looked confused, his eyes darting between me and the officer. This is Cooper. She is my wife. This is my house. I have a right to enter my own house. Miriam walked forward. She stopped 5 feet from him and held out a thick envelope. Actually, you do not, Miriam said. Her tone was sharp and professional. This is a temporary protective order granted by the Riverton Family Court last night. It bars you from entering this property or coming within 500 feet of Natalie Cooper until the preliminary hearing. And this, she handed him a second, heavier stack of papers, is a civil lawsuit regarding the forgery of her signature on the bank documents and the misappropriation of marital assets. Evan took the papers automatically, his hands shaking so violently that the pages fluttered in the wind. He stared at them, but I knew he could not read them. His brain was failing to process the magnitude of his loss. He looked up at me, the anger in his eyes dissolved, replaced by a pathetic, desperate pleading. Natalie, please, he said. His voice broke. Tears began to mix with the grime on his face. What are you doing? We can fix this. I know I messed up. I know the club thing got out of hand. But you cannot do this. You cannot lock me out of my life. I did not lock you out, Evan, I said. My voice was quiet, steady, and clear. You walked out. You walked out the moment you forged my name. You walked out the moment you sent $5,000 a month to Sabrina. You walked out when you stood on that stage and told the world you wanted a divorce. That was a joke. He cried, taking a step forward before the officer blocked him. It was just a line. I was drunk. I was just trying to look cool for the investors. I did it for us. Nat, I wanted to get the money so we could move to LA so we could have a better life. No, I said you wanted a life without me. You said I was dead weight. You said you were going to leave me with the debt. He went pale. I never said that. I have the text messages, Evan. I said I have the emails. I have the audio recordings from the booth. I gave copies to the FBI. I gave copies to the forensic accountants. I gave copies to your mother. He flinched as if I had slapped him. My mother. She deserves to know why her son is about to be indicted. I said. Evan looked at the house behind me. The house with the warm yellow siding. The oak tree in the front yard. The life we had built. He realized finally that he could not charm his way through this door. The charisma that worked in a nightclub did not work in the cold light of a Tuesday morning. He tried one last time. He slumped his shoulders, trying to look small, trying to look like the boy I had fallen in love with. Sabrina meant nothing, he sobbed. She was just a mistake. I was stressed. I needed an escape. But you are my wife. You are the only one who really knows me. Please, Nat, do not leave me alone with this. I cannot handle the feds alone. I need you. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me boring. I looked at the man who had laughed while I cooked his dinner. I looked at the man who had built a kingdom of lies and expected me to live in the dungeon. I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was only a vast, clean silence. I am not leaving you alone, Evan. I said, you have your lawyers. You have your drinking buddies. You have the consequences you ordered. I took a breath. The air tasted sweet. You thought the phrase "don't like it, divorce me" was your power, I said. You thought it was a threat that would keep me in line, but it wasn't a threat. Evan, it was permission, and I accepted it. Natalie, he whispered. I am divorced, I said. I have returned every secret you hid from me. I have returned every debt you tried to pin on me. From this moment on, I am not your shield. I am not your safety net. I am just a witness." I pointed to the street. "Go with the officers, Evan. They have some questions about your tax returns." "Wait!" he screamed as the officers stepped in, one of them taking him gently but firmly by the arm to lead him away from the property line. "You cannot do this. You love me." I looked him in the eye one last time. "From now on," I said, "every time you hear club music, I hope you remember the night at Aurora Pulse. I hope you remember it more than you remember the nights you laughed at me behind my back." I turned around. I did not watch them put him in the car. I did not watch him weep. I walked up the driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel. I walked up the steps to the front porch. I took the new key from my pocket. It slid into the lock with a smooth, satisfying click. I stepped inside and closed the door. The silence of the house wrapped around me. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence of waiting for a husband who would never come home. It was the peaceful, expansive silence of a blank page. I locked the deadbolt. I walked to the kitchen table. My old Lenovo laptop was open. Next to it was a cup of hot tea. On the screen was a job application page. It was for a senior analyst position at a forensic accounting firm in Seattle, a new city, a new coast, a place where no one knew the name Cooper. The cursor was blinking in the text box under the final question. "Tell us why you want this job." I sat down. I placed my hands on the keyboard. For the first time in 10 years, I was writing my own story. I typed because I spent too many years covering up the mistakes of others. Now I want to spend the rest of my life dragging them into the light. I pressed submit. The screen flashed. Application received. I closed the laptop. Outside, the siren of the police car faded into the distance, taking the past with it. Inside, the sun was just beginning to rise. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below telling me where you are listening from to connect and share your thoughts. I invite you to subscribe to the channel Azad Revenge Stories, like the video, and support us by hitting the hype button so that the story in this video can be heard by more people.